C'est un honneur et un grand bonheur de servir la musique avec amour et humilité. It is an honor and a great joy to serve music with love and humility. That sums it up pretty well, right? It has the element of humility, love, and passion that we've talked about already in the previous sections. And it tells that Callas considered serving music as a great joy, as well as an honor. It's not just your duty and devotion to do your work well, but it's also a joy. Now, before we expand a bit more on this, let's watch one more clip from the same interview from 1969 in French.
Oh mon Dieu, ce que j'ai voulu être, c'est pour l'art. Tout ce que je veux, c'est toujours à servir l'art. Alors si j'ai voulu, souvent je me suis fait des ennemis, c'est sûrement pas pour moi, évidemment. Mais nous servons cette merveille, cette chose unique au monde, que c'est la musique.
Est-ce que cette conception très haute de votre devoir d'artiste ne se justifie pas parce que ce que vous servez, finalement, c'est quelque chose de très grand, qui est la musique?
C'est l'intangible.
C'est l'intangible. The intangible nature of music is why it captivates us, it fascinates us. Music is ubiquitous, it's everywhere, in every single culture, in every single ceremony in the world. Music is always there. We're hearing music many times a day, usually. Some of us more than others, but we can't ignore that music is an integral part of human life and a way to express ourselves. Maybe the greatest way of artistic expression that exists, because music has always been there since the beginning of time. As well as dance, but dance requires music for it to work. So in that sense, I'm pretty sure about this argument. The music is maybe the art form that is the end-all and be-all of everything, even though many other art forms are wonderful as well. We can't argue that. But now if we consider this rhetoric that Callas has every time she speaks, talks about music and serving art and serving music, it's a very noble thought, but we have to make a slight musicological tangent to understand fully the context of these things that she says and the way that she thinks about music. So Callas felt she was serving something greater than herself. First, the composers who made the music or who put the notes on paper, and then the whole concept of art and especially music. And we have to note that this is very much an idea from the 19th century. Before that, people didn't really have thoughts like this. They appreciated music and art, but they didn't, for example, view musical pieces as these grand constructions that are a complete expression of the composer's worldview and thoughts. Composers in itself weren't that appreciated in general. They weren't put on a pedestal like they are now and like they were especially in the 19th century. There were, of course, some philosophers who argued for this thought of music being the greatest art and composers being the greatest geniuses of all time. And one of them is Schopenhauer. I can't remember his first name at the moment right now. I'll put it on the screen. But he was one of the philosophers that argued for the fact that music, or wanted to ascend music up the ranks as a great art. Because before that, music had been more a way of entertaining people. It was something related to specific circumstances, private events where people wanted to have a good time. They either played themselves or danced or sung, and it was much more contextually contained than in the 19th century when the public concerts started to emerge. So especially after Beethoven, this whole cult of the genius composers began. A bit before that, let's say, like Mozart's time or Haydn's time, it wasn't as, yes, they were venerated as individuals, but it wasn't as global, shall we say, as broad as the cult of the composers in the 18th and 19th century. But then later on, in the 20th century, there was this philosopher called Theodor Adorno that you may know of, and he is to blame a lot for why we view classical music and opera as such an elitist art form that just basic people can't understand, for example, which is completely, like, it's not true, obviously, but he's to blame for a lot of this narrative of why we view classical music as something that's really put on the pedestal, but it really did not used to be like that. It was the music of some elitist circles, yes, some aristocrats in Europe. They, like Mozart, he played for other aristocrats, basically, for most of the time. And he composed for other people that he often knew himself, personally. But musicians in general, and composers, often composers were also, like, basic musicians, can we say, at the same time. They just loved music and expressed themselves through music, but they weren't put on a pedestal as much as we do now. They were almost like artisans of music, not great artists, if you catch my drift. So like I said before, in the 19th century, musical pieces became these great works, and great composers became geniuses, and the work that they produced became something sacred, immutable, that the composer conveys from his mind straight into the notes, and then those notes go straight into the ears of the listener in a concert hall, for example. And this view sounds very nice, and people have believed this for a long time, but as musicological research has shown, that this view completely ignores the importance of the performance aspect of music. How it gathers so many people around the event of producing music. You have to have the listeners who interact with the performers as well. It's not just a one-sided business as it was portrayed in the 19th century. And the other thing that it ignores is that the notation in itself of a musical score is very limited. What the composer put on the notes can't be, or what, for example, the composer thinks in his or her head at the time of composing will never be translated completely in the same way as the composer would have wanted into the listener's ears, because the performance is a huge variable. The performance can vary so much. Yeah. So this was just a side point that I wanted to make, so that you understand that when you watch these interviews of Callas, this is the sort of atmosphere and the narrative where she's coming from. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't glorify composers or anyone who makes music for that matter. Yes, we can hype about it. It's really fun to discover a piece or a performance that you really love and then tell about it to other people. But I just wanted to share these thoughts, just these very general, broad thoughts on the 19th century's impact on our day and age right now, because we can't ignore that it still does influence the industrial age in general, and influences us so much right now even. And of course, if you happen to be a fellow musicologist as well, it would be really nice to talk about this a bit further. These were just some broad and opening comments on this whole big topic of 19th century music and the ideology of music of that time. But I have to say that even though this idea of serving composers in this way has this historical baggage, the ideal of serving something that Callas had is a very noble one, because it is much more fulfilling to have a spirit of service and of collaboration with other people. It's just way less fun to try to accomplish anything on your own, and then if it works, you receive the praise alone. It can be fun, but I would argue it's just much more fun to do stuff with other people and for other people. So in Callas's case, for example, singing was fun on its own to her, I'm guessing. But if and when she wanted to be excellent at it, she had to have someone to sing to. It's just so much easier to perfect your craft while serving and honoring the audience and the receivers, and while having nice colleagues to work with. So as we know, it is also enjoyable to feel accomplished and to have nice vanity metrics or whatever, but they just don't matter in the long run. The people who are your closest ones will never care about those, really. They may be happy for you and root for you, but they only care about what kind of person you are actually on the inside. And if we are serving a broader audience, or if we're doing anything in public in any form, it's just better to have the attitude, or at least I try to work on this attitude, that I'm doing this as a service to other people. It's not for myself, even though it is still very fun on its own. But essentially, anything that we do is usually just the means to connect with other people. That's literally all we want in life. Connect with other people and not think about some random numbers and accolades that we may have or that are associated to us. That said, of course, we don't want to just please other people either and compromise our own authenticity. That's no use. But yeah, I think as an end note, it's just a question of us needing people, like Barbra Streisand sings. People who need people. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. It doesn't mean that we're needy, that we can't live on our own. Of course, we have to be independent in the sense that we don't have to live through someone else. But we do need other people in life. Yeah. Life is too hard on your own. But let's take Barbra Streisand as an example. Do you think, if you know any of like the roster of accolades she has accomplished in her life, it's a crazy amount of awards and every kind of recognition she could ever have, she's basically had them. But do you think she thinks about them often? Do you think she remembers how many awards she's gotten? I don't think so, and I think she said that as well in some interview somewhere. I'm guessing she remembers mostly just the fun times she's had with her collaborators, and if she's had and when she's had a good connection with the audience, for example, when she's singing. And of course, even more importantly, she remembers and she values more what kind of a mother she's been to her son Jason, for example. Those are the things that actually stay with you, not the occasional accolades that feel really nice but don't really contribute to anything in your own, how can I say it, that just don't matter as much as these other things in life. Maybe that was a bit of a rambly thought, but I hope you got the idea. We want to connect to a spirit of service, because it is a great honor and a great joy to serve whatever you serve with love and humility, like Callas said. Okay, well, in the next part, we'll be discussing a bit more the element of trusting your own gut.